In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up your Blackboard Gradebook from the very beginning. So I have chosen just a random course from last summer where the gradebook wasn't set up as an example so that I can start from what your course looks like when you first get it. So I am going to go to the Full Grade Center, and you can see that I've only enrolled one student, and that's OTC Heat, which is just a sample student account into this course to show what it looks like. So nothing has been done to this gradebook whatsoever. So the first thing I'm going to do is, first of all, this is a percentage-based gradebook, which most of you use. If you use a points-based gradebook, you're going to do things a little differently because you don't have to set up weighted calculations. If you do use a points-based gradebook, and I know there are some of you who are really good at it, the key is make sure your students always know how to calculate their grades. So there's a running total of points. Your students need to be aware of it. That's something they can't necessarily figure out by looking at their grade report, so you will have to keep them aware of it. In the rest of this video, we're just going to talk about setting up a percentage-based gradebook because that is what the majority of our faculty use. So first off, I want to say that I know there are some people who can manage to do a percentage-based gradebook and can have items like tests and assignments that are out of different points, like a quiz has 30, but it's still percentage-based, and you can make that work. But unless you're really good at it and you really know what you're doing, it is very confusing to students and to the teachers. So my recommendation is always use a percentage-based gradebook and make everything out of 100 possible points. It is just much easier for everybody to understand. So that's what I'm going to do in this video because that's what most people do. So if you do gradebooks some other way, please call me so we can talk about it and I'll tell you anything you need to do differently. Okay, so first thing is the little green check right here means that this column, which is the total column, is set as the external grade column. That is a default setting in Blackboard and it's not something we can change administratively. A total column, though, is for a points-based gradebook. So if you're percentage-based, you don't need this column. So what the external grade column means is that in the spring, when we move to Banner and Blackboard integration, the grade that is in this external grade column is the grade that is going to get pulled into Banner and is going to show up on students' transcripts. So this is why we are right now focusing so much on making sure that Blackboard gradebooks are correct and that everyone is using Blackboard gradebooks, because in a couple of semesters, these grades will get pulled into Banner and they have to be right. Also, starting this current semester, summer semester, we are administratively running some reports to check for students who are at risk due to grades. So that is why it is very important that your grades are in Blackboard starting right now and that they're always accurate. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I need to change this external grade column because I'm not using the total column. I'm using the weighted total column. So I am going to click on the drop-down arrow to the right of the weighted total column. The drop-down is always to the right of the column. So if you look at this total column, you might think this is the arrow that goes with the total column, but it's not. It's this one over here. So I am going to click on the drop-down by the weighted total, and I'm going to choose Set as External Grade. Now my green check mark has moved to the weighted total column. That's where I want it to be. Next, I'm going to choose the drop-down beside the total column and delete this column and click OK, because I do not need that column. I guess I should have said this at the beginning of the video, but I would recommend, if you're setting up a gradebook and you've never done it before, that you do these steps as I'm doing them. So press pause on the video, do what I'm doing, and keep going. So now my weighted total column is my external grade. I have a green check mark. So the next thing I need to do is I need to tell Blackboard how to calculate the weighted total, which is the average for the course. And that needs to match my syllabus. So I'm going to drag over This is what you would have on your syllabus. You would have all of the categories that you are using in your class that grades are assigned to, and you have the percentage that they count toward the final grade, and it all adds up to 100. So I need to tell Blackboard that this is how to calculate the course grade. So I'm going to move this to my other screen, but you just know you are using what the categories, the grade distribution on your course syllabus, and they have to match. So I need to go to Manage Categories and make sure that I have all of the categories that are on my syllabus. So I'm going to put these side by side for a minute. Blackboard has 7 default categories. These are the 7 you always start with, and you can't delete these. You don't have to use them, but you can't get rid of them. They're just going to be there. So I have a test category. I do not have a quiz category. I do have a discussion category. I don't have a final. And for homework assignments, I'm just going to use this assignment category because it's close enough, and I can tell students that that means homework assignments. So I need to create a quiz category and a final category. So I am going to click Create Category. I'm going to name one Quizzes. You do not need to put anything in the description. Just click Submit. Now you'll see I have a quiz category, and this category has a little box beside it. That is because you are allowed to edit or delete the categories that you created, but you can't delete or edit the default ones. So I'm also going to create a final category and submit. So now I have all of the categories that I need to use, and I have some extras, but that doesn't matter. So I'm going to click OK at the bottom right and go back to my gradebook. Now I need to tell Blackboard how to calculate this weighted total grade. So I am going to again click the drop down beside weighted total, and I am going to edit column information. This is where you tell Blackboard your weighting. So I'm going to move this out of the way again. The first thing I like to do, and I recommend that everyone does this, is change the column name to course grade or course average. I'm going to use course average because I think sometimes students don't know what weighted total means, but they know what course average means, or they know what course grade means. I'm not saying you have to do this, I just like it. You don't need to do anything in the grade center name or the description. Primary display should be percentage. In this column, I like to do a secondary display letter because that means it'll show, for example, 66%, and then it'll have in parentheses a D. I just think it's easy for you and students to look at the letter grade. You could sort by letter grades, and I'll show you that later. You don't have to do that. It's just a preference. Scroll on down, and this is where we're going to tell Blackboard how to average the grade. So if you already have a lot of assignments in your class, then you would have a bunch of assignments listed in this box that says columns to select. You're not going to worry about those. What you're going to use is the categories to select. So I am going to select all of the categories that I have on my syllabus. So I have assignment. So I'm going to choose that one, click this second arrow, not the one up here, and move it over. And then I'm going to enter that my assignments are 10%. I'm going to do this for all of my categories. I don't know why, but sometimes they go to the top, sometimes they go to the bottom, sometimes they go in the middle. Just find them and put the percentage in for everything. Discussions are 15. Quizzes are, see, this one went to the bottom somewhere, 25. And a final is 20. So I'm going to hit enter, and it tells me total weight 100 and takes me back to the gradebook. So I can always edit column information and go look at this again. My total weight's 100, everything's right. Never change this equally, always leave this equally. If you are going to drop a grade, for instance, if you drop the lowest test grade or the lowest quiz grade or whatever, that is perfectly fine, and I'll tell you how to do that, but you should not do that until the very end of the semester. And the reason for that is if you drop one lowest grade For instance, if I'm going to drop a lowest test grade, I would put a 1 right here and drop 1 lowest grade. I don't know why you would ever drop a highest grade, so don't do that. But if I put this 1 here right now, then if I have a student who makes a 90 on the very first test, Blackboard's already going to not include that 90 in the grade calculation, and that grade is going to be wrong. So I don't recommend that you do this until the very end of the semester. You can tell students at the end, I'm going to drop a quiz grade, but don't do it until the end, because if you do it at the beginning, it is going to constantly change which grade is being dropped, and students will never be real sure about their average. So don't do it now, but that's how you do it. I didn't make any changes here, so I'm going to cancel at the bottom. Remember that you always have to submit. If you make a change here and then you just scroll on up and you click on something else, your change was not made. You have to click submit. And I didn't change anything. I should tell you, leave all these options the way they are. You always want to include this grade. You always want to show it to students. Do not ever show students the statistics. That is just asking for trouble. So leave all of these at the default settings. So I'm going to go back to my gradebook. So now Blackboard knows how to calculate my grade. I know that the grade is going in the correct column. I don't have any assignments currently created in this class, so I'm just going to pause my recording for a minute because I don't want to spend time in this video showing you how to actually create assignments, because there are other videos for that. So I'm going to create some real quick. Okay, so I have created a couple of assignments now in my course, and I just created them in my Module 1 folder and called them Quiz 1, Test 1, Week 1 Homework. So when I create these assignments or tests or quizzes in Blackboard, Blackboard automatically creates the column in the Grade Center for me. So I don't need to go in the Grade Center and create a Quiz 1 column, because it's an online quiz in Blackboard, and when I created it, the column got created. So these are all three of these are assignments that students are actually doing in Blackboard. But my final exam is going to be an in-class final on paper, and they're not going to do it in Blackboard, but I need it to be in this gradebook. So I need to create a column. So I'm going to click on Create Column and call it Final. And I don't need to put anything in here. I do need to change primary display to percentage. We are always doing percentage, not score. And I need to tell the gradebook that this is my final category, so that this grade gets calculated correctly. It's out of 100 points, and submit. So now I have, if I scroll over, a final exam column. So I don't have any discussions in here, but you just know those would work the same way. When you create the discussions, they get created in the gradebook. So now I want to make sure that everything, all of my assignments, are going to the right category in the gradebook. Because if I tell Blackboard how to average the grades, it won't work unless everything is actually in the right category. So Manage Column Organization is where you can check that a lot of stuff is right. So I can see these are all of the assignments that I have right now in my gradebook. I have 4. Course average is my external grade column. Always leave that one at the top. And I have a problem because right now my points possible on the average are only 77.5. So if I look down at my points possible, I see that I have on test 1 only 10 possible points. So I know that I need to fix that, and we'll get to that in a second. The other thing you always need to check here in the column organization is your categories. So when you create an assessment that's a test or a quiz, Blackboard always thinks it's a test. Blackboard is always going to put any test, because you can't, they're the same thing. They're both the same kind of assessment. Whether you call it a test or a quiz, you're creating it the same way in Blackboard. And Blackboard's always going to assign it to the test category. So I need to change this quiz 1 to a quiz category. So I'm going to select the box, and then I'm going to change category to quizzes, and I can see that it's right. If you had multiple items that you needed to fix, you could click all of them, change category to, and change it to the right one. So everything's in the right category. I need to fix the points possible. While I'm here, I'm just going to show you that you can drag stuff around you can change the order of the columns in the gradebook is what I'm trying to say. So if I want all of my tests to be at the beginning, I can click on this little icon beside test 1 and drag it above quiz 1. I dragged it too far, it's kind of tricky. So I'm going to leave my average and the test, so you can move stuff around. If you have columns that are hidden, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, you would see those here. I am just going to submit, and then I'm going to fix my test. So I'm going to go under my lessons and find my test, and I'm going to edit the test. You could also get to the test if you go under course tools and then test surveys and pools. You could bring up all of your tests. There's just 2 different ways to do the same thing. I only have 1 question. I am going to tell, since I only have 1 question, then that question is worth 100 points. I'm going to make this question 100 points and update. I need to select the box, so Blackboard is telling me I didn't choose this box, to make the points 100 and update. Now my total points are 100. So if you import a test from anywhere and it gives you a funky number of points, like there are 37 questions and it has 37 points, the easiest way to do that is to go into edit your test, adjust the point values until you get it to 100. So if it's a weird, odd number, it may mean that you have 1 question that's 2.5 points and 1 is 2.75, whatever you have to do to make it add up to 100, but you want the total to be 100 just for the sake of not confusing your students. So I'm going to go OK, and that's fixed. So that's fixed in my gradebook now. So I want to show you a couple more things, just tricks, gradebook tricks. I now know that everything in my gradebook is calculating correctly. So I recommend that when you add new items to your class, to your gradebook, you go to Manage Column Organization and make sure that the categories are correct and the points possible are correct. So when you get the gradebook, you have a username and an external ID column. For students, these are the exact same thing, and this is just taking up room on your screen. So I always recommend that you just hide one of these columns. So I am going to hide from instructor view, because you don't need 2 columns with a student ID in there. You also don't need the availability column, and I'll show you why in just a second. So I am going to hide also this column, and that just means I can see more on my screen. The reason you don't need the availability column is because when students are unavailable, you get a symbol that lets you know they're unavailable. So, for instance, if you drop a student or they get purged or they're a no-show and they're not on your banner roster anymore, they do not need to be in your Blackboard course. So the way you make them unavailable is to go under your course management, users and groups, users. I only have 1 student. You don't see this drop down until you hover over the name, and then you get the drop down. You want to change the user's availability to no and submit. And then when I go back to my full grade center, my student has this icon that lets me know that student is unavailable in my course. So since this student has dropped, I don't really want to look at them in the gradebook anymore. So I am going to click the drop down and hide this row, and now I have no students because that was my only one. So my student got reinstated, so I'm going to go back to users. I'm going to change the availability to yes. So the student is now available, but when I go to my gradebook, oh no, the student's not here. So what I need to do is manage row visibility And this shows me all of my students, even the ones who are hidden. So I'm going to click my student and show the row and submit. And there he is again. So that is what you do to make sure your Blackboard roster matches your banner roster, and to get those students who are withdrawn out of your Blackboard Gradebook, just so that they're not in your way, and you can always put them back. They're not deleted, they're just out of your sight. So if I have a student in class who is questioning a grade or grades, or I need to show them something in the gradebook, and I don't want them to see the 25 other students in the class, you can click hide other rows, and if I had multiple students in this class, that would hide everybody except the student I'm talking to. So it's an easy way to just have a quick conference with the student and show them what you're seeing without them seeing everything else. And then if I had other rows, I can't because I don't have any other rows, but then to get them all back, you just do the opposite. You show all rows and they would come back. So those are just a few tips to make your gradebook easier to work with. If you decide that you are not going to use week 1 homework and you want it out of the gradebook so that students don't get confused, and where I see confusion happen a lot is, for example, if you have a lot of assignments in a master course that you use in the fall and the spring but you don't use in the summer, it gets confusing to students if they still see those assignments and those gradebook items because they think they have a lot of assignments they haven't done yet. So what you can do is click the drop down and hide from students. This little red slash lets you know the students don't see that. Well, I don't want to see it either. So I can click it again and hide from instructor view. And now it's gone. If I want to get it back, it's still managed column organization. I can see this is hidden. You can also hide items from this area. However, you have to hide them from students first. So if I click test 1 and I hide selected column, I am only hiding it from myself. And we have had student complaints because the instructor thought, because you would think logically that if you hide columns here, they're completely hidden, but they're not. They're only hidden from the instructor. They are not hidden from the student. So you have to hide them from the gradebook, from the students first in the gradebook, and then hide from the instructor. So if you had multiple columns, like a whole set of assignments, quizzes, or whatever you're not going to use, then hide all of those from students first in the gradebook. Then you could come here and click them all and hide them from yourself. But that is the order you have to do it. I'm going to show this column again because I want it back. So I'm going to show selected column and submit. When I get back to the gradebook, I'm still not showing it to students. So there might be times when you want to see items in your gradebook, if it's your way of keeping up with something that, you know, maybe you give participation points, but you don't really want students to see that. You could hide it from students and you could keep up with it. There would be other reasons you might want to do that, but just know that the red slash means students can't see it. Always make sure you do that before you hide items from yourself, or you will cause confusion. If you want to show it to students again, you hide from students on off, they can see it again. So they can see all of these things. So the last thing I want to show you in this gradebook video, because it's getting a little long, is I showed you how to create a column, and you only create a column if your students are not doing the actual assignment in Blackboard, if it's something they're doing in class, and not in Blackboard. There might be times that you need to create a whole bunch of columns. For example, if you always do in-class labs and you have lab grades and those are not associated with Blackboard, you just need to enter the grades. Or if you do in-class quizzes and you need to enter those grades. There is a tool called Batch Create Gradebook Columns, but it is not turned on by default. It is turned off by default. So to turn that on, if you are someone who does in-class lab, or if you're someone who's not doing any assignments in Blackboard, if they're all going to be in class, this is the easiest way. If you know I'm going to have 5 tests, I'm going to have 10 quizzes, I'm going to have a certain number of homework assignments, and you don't have to know that exact number from the beginning. You might think you're going to have 10 quizzes and you create 10 quiz columns, but then you have 8 or 15. You can always add more or delete some later, but this is the fastest way to get a bunch in there at the beginning. So you need to first turn on the tool. So you're going to go to Customization and then Tool Availability. And there is a tool called Batch Create Grade Columns. I am going to check the available box. There's also a tool called Batch Delete Grade Columns. You would need that tool if you really messed up in your gradebook, or you imported a bunch of stuff you didn't want. If you want to get them all out of there, you can batch delete. But for now, I just need Batch Create. I'm going to turn that on and submit. And then when I go under my course tools, I have a Batch Create Grade Columns, and I think I'm going to have 10 quizzes, so I am going to do number of columns 10. And this is where you have to type the column name over and over. So I'm going to do quiz 1. Primary display type is percentage. Category is quizzes. Points possible 100. So I am going to just copy and paste and paste and paste and paste. And I'm going to pause real quick so you don't have to watch. Okay, so now I have quiz 1 through quiz 10 because I changed my numbers to 1 through 10. They are all percentage. They are all quizzes category. They are all 100 possible points. I'm going to submit. And it just takes you back to this screen. So if you wanted to do the same thing for other categories, for tests, labs, whatever, you could do those too. I'm not going to do that. I am going to go back to my full grade center. And now I can see that I have all these quizzes, and I forget every time that for whatever reason, even though I put them in order 1 through 10, they go 10 through 1 in my gradebook, and that drives me crazy. So I am going to manage my column organization. And I also like and you can see I had a quiz 1 already. So this is something, I just created another quiz 1. You obviously wouldn't want to do that because you would confuse your students, but I'm not going to fix that right now. I can drag these in order, which I'm not going to do all of them, but this is how, if you're like me and you have some OTC or OCD, not OTC tendencies, you would drag these in the right order. You also, if you wanted to put all your tests together, then all your quizzes, then your final at the very end. So we're not doing our final yet. I want that to be at the end. This is where you would do that. Again, I'm checking all of these categories are correct. All the points possible are 100, and submit. So this has been Gradebook Basics, how to set up your gradebook with all of these quizzes that I just created because, and I didn't put them all in order, some of them I did, because these are in-class quizzes. To enter grades, all you're going to do is click in the box and enter grades and move on down through the students. You always, always, always need to enter the zeros for students who don't do an assignment. If you do not enter the zeros, then they are going to think their average is a lot higher than what it is because you didn't put the 0 in there. So I always recommend, if you have students who missed a quiz or a test or a homework or whatever, when you're grading those, you put the grade in right then. For these tests and quizzes that I created actually in Blackboard, I don't need to grade these because, for instance, my quiz was a true-false quiz, and I put the correct answers in there. So as students take it, the grades are going to show up. For the homework, that's an assignment, which is like a Dropbox. So they're maybe submitting a Word document or whatever you ask them for. You actually have to grade those, and there are no attempts in here. Otherwise, it would say grade attempt, and I could go in, so I can grade attempts. If I click on the arrow by the column, grade attempts, You can grade with usernames hidden, which is just smart if, I know we all love all of our students, but if there maybe are some you love more than others, or some who push your buttons in class, and you want to make sure that you don't have any bias, whether it's intentional or unintentional when you're grading, then you can grade with the usernames hidden, and you don't see those. You just go through and grade work. So I think that's kind of handy. If it was a test or quiz that was totally messed up, you can clear all of the attempts, or you could go in your settings and allow another attempt. So those are just some tips to make your grading easier. As you enter grades, you will see the course average changing. As we administratively pull grade reports, this is the grade that we're going to get. So your grades, if you haven't checked all of these things, checked your categories, if you're not entering your grades, then there's no way for anyone other than you to know your grades aren't right. So we need for all of them to be right. So I hope this has been helpful. If there are other questions I didn't answer, please just ask me. Thank you all for listening.